Today's experience is that of a sister who was shown the correct mark every Christian must have to be able to enter into heaven, if not he or she will end up in hellfire. Watch this to the end to understand her experience. It's easy, even comforting, to believe that simply being a good person or attending church is sufficient. I understand this because that was my mindset for so long. However, what I witnessed during my near-death experience showed me that good intentions and appearances do not necessarily equate to genuine salvation. The revelation I had opened my eyes to the deeper, often hidden aspects of faith, those parts that are invisible to others but known to God. I believe with all my heart that this message could help countless others avoid the heartbreaking fate I nearly faced. There are many, even devoted Christians, who may be as I once was, faithful in appearance yet missing that essential connection with Jesus. My name is Bridget. Looking back, I realize my life had all the hallmarks of a happy, fulfilling journey. I was blessed with a loving family that grounded me in values and taught me the importance of faith, love, and kindness from an early age. As I grew older, my dreams took on a shape that felt almost like destiny. I longed for a family of my own, for a life rooted in love and faith, just as I had experienced growing up. I dreamed of a marriage filled with mutual respect and shared beliefs, of raising children in a home where faith would be a foundation, a constant source of comfort and guidance. In 2017, I married a wonderful man who embodied everything I had hoped for. He shared my values and my vision of a family built on love and trust. We connected on so many levels, not only as partners in life but also as partners in faith. We dreamed of building a life together that was devoted to one another and to God, a life that could reflect the values we held dear. In 2018, just a year into our marriage, our dreams for a joyful, lasting future together took an unexpected and devastating turn. I started noticing subtle changes, small tremors in my hands, moments of weakness that I couldn't quite explain, and a general fatigue that seemed to grow worse each day. After a series of tests and doctor visits, I received a diagnosis that felt like a death sentence: amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. I was told that there was no cure, that I only had a few years left, and that these remaining years would be marked by a slow, painful decline. I remember feeling a numbness settle over me as I absorbed the reality of what lay ahead. The life I had dreamed of building with my husband suddenly felt distant, almost unreachable. As the months passed, the disease began to take its toll, and I could feel my body betraying me bit by bit. Simple tasks I had once taken for granted became difficult, sometimes impossible. My muscles weakened, I stumbled over my words and struggled to walk across a room. Each day seemed to bring new challenges and more painful reminders of what ALS was doing to my body. The emotional toll was just as brutal. I grappled with waves of grief and anger, feeling as though my life was slipping away far too soon. The fear of leaving my husband, of not being able to live out our dreams, was almost more than I could bear. As my illness progressed, I could feel my body growing weaker each day. Then came that night in August 2020, a night I now realize marked the end of my life as I had known it. My husband was by my side, tending to me with his usual care and compassion, but I could sense a shift in my body, a sudden heaviness, as though life itself was beginning to slip from my grasp. My breathing grew labored, each breath requiring more effort than the last, and I felt myself growing faint, my consciousness drifting. There was no doubt in my mind, my time had come. The fear was overwhelming, yet in that moment, I surrendered, allowing myself to let go. Then, just like that, the pain and weakness vanished. I felt a profound sense of peace as my spirit separated from my failing body. I was floating, gently drifting away, surrounded by a lightness and calm that seemed to embrace me completely. It was as though I was finally free from the constraints of my earthly body, liberated from the weight of my illness. I left behind not only my physical suffering but also the deep fears and worries that had accompanied my journey with ALS. There was an indescribable peace, a calm that filled me as I moved into a new realm. I found myself in a place that was beyond anything I could have imagined. This realm was neither dark nor bright, instead, it glowed with a gentle, ethereal light that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air was thick with a sense of reverence, and there was a silence so deep that words felt unnecessary, even irrelevant. I looked around and saw countless other souls, all dressed in pure white, moving together in unison. There was a harmony, a shared purpose, as though each of us understood we were part of something greater than ourselves. It was unlike anything I had ever felt. Every soul, including mine, was adorned in a simple yet elegant bridal gown, a symbol, I instinctively knew, of purity and readiness. Although I couldn't see the faces of those around me, I sensed that we were all being gently guided forward, drawn by an unseen force that seemed to beckon us closer to a magnificent gate standing tall in the distance. The silence around us was profound, but it was a silence filled with awe, as if we were all on the brink of something monumental. As I moved closer to the gate, I could feel an indescribable power emanating from it. Its grandeur was overwhelming, and yet there was a warmth that beckoned me forward, a silent invitation to approach. The other souls and I moved in unison, each of us seemingly aware of the importance of this journey, our steps guided by a force beyond our comprehension. The closer I got, the more I felt a sense of reverence that permeated every part of me. This was a place of holiness, a place beyond anything I had known on earth. Then I saw them, the 7 angels, standing guard at the entrance. Each one radiated a brilliance that filled the entire space, but one stood slightly ahead of the others, his light shining with an intensity that made my heart swell with both awe and fear. Their presence was majestic, and their gaze was penetrating, as though they could see into the deepest parts of my soul. I felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation, knowing that my journey was leading me to a moment of ultimate truth. The gate loomed before us, beautiful and imposing, and I sensed that beyond it lay the culmination of everything I had longed for, a place of eternal peace, love, and union with God. As I drew closer to the magnificent gate, I felt the weight of an unspoken question pressing on my soul: was I truly ready to enter? In the silence of that sacred space, I watched as other souls approached the angel at the gate. One by one, each person stood before him, hoping to be granted passage. I noticed that some received a beautiful, radiant crown upon their heads, a crown that marked them as worthy to enter. Others, however, were turned away, their expressions filled with heartbreak and despair. It was clear that the crown was not just a beautiful ornament, it was a profound symbol, one that marked those who had achieved something essential, something eternal. The scene before me was both awe-inspiring and heartbreaking. Those who received the crown stepped through the gate with a joy that filled the air, their faces glowing with peace and fulfillment. But for those who did not receive it, the gate remained closed. Their sorrow and regret were palpable and intense, painful longing to enter a place that was now out of reach. I could feel their anguish, their cries piercing the silence around us. These souls seemed to have lived good, moral lives, but there was something missing, something they hadn't understood or embraced deeply enough. Their outward actions and devout lives were not enough on their own, they lacked the one thing that truly mattered. As I observed this, I realized that the crown represented true salvation, a seal for those who had genuinely accepted Jesus Christ, not just in name, but in the deepest recesses of their hearts. It was more than a title or a mere profession of faith, it symbolized a complete surrender, a transformative relationship with Christ that permeated their entire being. This crown could not be earned through good deeds or through religious rituals. It could only be received through an authentic, heartfelt acceptance of Jesus, an acceptance that went beyond outward appearances and reached into the very soul. In that moment, I felt a deep conviction settle over me. I saw clearly that salvation was not something one could earn through moral behavior or regular church attendance. It required a profound inner transformation, a sincere and unwavering acceptance of Jesus as Lord and Savior. Without this acceptance, all the good deeds in the world were empty gestures, unable to secure a place in the kingdom. The crown, I realized, was a symbol of true faith, a faith that surrendered wholly to God and embraced the redemptive work of Christ on the cross. As I stood there, watching souls come and go, the truth became undeniable. Heaven was a place reserved for those who had surrendered themselves to Christ fully and genuinely, those who had trusted not in their own righteousness, but in His grace. It wasn't about appearing righteous or doing good works for others to see, it was about a faith that transformed the heart, a faith that lived and breathed in every action and thought. This was the kind of faith the crown represented, a mark of true salvation that could not be faked or feigned. I could see, with striking clarity, that many who were turned away had relied on outward deeds to prove their worthiness. They had lived moral lives, attended church, and performed acts of charity. But beneath the surface, their faith lacked the true depth that only comes from a personal, heartfelt relationship with Jesus. They had practiced faith outwardly but had not opened their hearts to true transformation. This distinction was essential, and it was one that could not be overlooked at the gate of heaven. Without an inner faith that reflected a genuine acceptance of Christ, even the best deeds were not enough. The angel's gaze was piercing as he looked at each soul, seeing beyond the surface to the heart's true condition. I understood then why good deeds, by themselves, were insufficient. True salvation was not a transaction, it was a transformation. Good deeds, though important, were only reflections of a deeper, more profound surrender. Without a heart that had truly embraced Jesus, good deeds were mere acts, unable to bridge the gap to heaven. The crown, then, was not given for good deeds, it was bestowed upon those who had opened their hearts to Jesus in true faith. As I listened, the angel's words to the rejected souls were seared into my memory. He spoke to them not with anger, but with a solemn finality. You have been in the church for so many years, outwardly devout and pious, yet you have denied the lordship of Jesus Christ over your life, he said. Without true surrender, without the acceptance of Christ's salvation, you do not have a place in heaven. His words were a heartbreaking reminder of what true faith required, and I felt a deep sorrow for those who had missed this essential truth. There came a point when I realized it was my turn to stand before the angel at the gate. The anticipation was overwhelming, and as I approached, a profound sense of dread settled in my heart. I felt completely exposed before him, as if every hidden corner of my soul was laid bare. His gaze was intense, and I sensed he could see beyond anything I could hide. There was a brief moment of silence, and then, with a heavy heart, he looked at me and shook his head. I stood frozen as his eyes met mine, searching me with a depth that was both comforting and terrifying. In that moment, I understood that this was the ultimate judgment, and nothing I could say or do would alter what he saw in my heart. All my years of identifying as a Christian, of attending church and performing what I thought were good deeds, seemed to fall away in his presence. The question that lingered was not about the life I had led on the surface, but about the sincerity of my faith. It wasn't enough to simply bear the label, he was searching for evidence of a deeper truth, a true surrender and acceptance of Christ. When he spoke, his words pierced me in a way that nothing ever had before. You are not allowed to go through the gate, he said gently but firmly. The weight of those words settled over me like a heavy fog, each syllable deepening the sense of sorrow in my heart. The realization of my unpreparedness was overwhelming. Despite my years as a Christian in name, I had never truly surrendered to Christ in my heart. I had relied on my own understanding, my actions, and my moral standing rather than fully placing my trust in Him. The truth was heartbreaking, and the regret I felt was immense. I saw others passing through the gate, joyfully stepping into eternal peace, and yet here I was, so close but completely unable to follow. Just as the weight of this revelation settled fully upon me, I felt a sudden shift, a powerful force pulling me back. The ethereal world around me began to blur, fading from view as the sensation of my physical body returned. It was as though I was being drawn through a tunnel, away from the realm of souls, back into the confines of my earthly existence. Returning from my experience on the other side, I felt as though a veil had been lifted. My perspective on faith and salvation was forever changed. In the months that followed, something remarkable happened. Despite my diagnosis, I began to feel my strength returning. Movements that had once been difficult became easier. My doctors were astounded, unable to explain my improvement. Little by little, my health was restored, and I was no longer bound by the limitations that ALS had once placed on me. It was a miracle beyond explanation, a gift that I could only attribute to God's mercy. Thank you for staying to the end of this experience. Save a soul by sharing this video with your friends and families, so that they will be saved from the path of hell. Subscribe to our channel if you have not, to remain updated whenever we share another experience that is being sent to us. Thank you.